Hi, everyone. My name's Sachin Ranchod. I work on the developer relations team at Slack. As part of my role, I help our customers build and adopt internal integrations. For those of you who don't know that term, an internal integration is simply a Slack app that you build for yourself, for your team, as opposed to something that you install and configure from the app directory. Internal integrations are a great way to integrate your custom internal tools into Slack, and we've even seen customers use them to combine multiple systems together behind a single interface in Slack to support more complex workflows. Today, we're going to have John Arthorne from Shopify's production engineering team join us to talk about how they use an internal integration to give their engineers superpowers. For context, the production engineering team at Shopify is responsible for really driving their DevOps culture. They are the team that builds and maintains the infrastructure that Shopify runs on. They're also the team that's responsible for creating the developer tools that lets the engineering team take advantage of that infrastructure to get their code into production and then look after it once it's there. For those of you that haven't used Shopify, they are a platform to help you manage and build and manage your e-commerce store. In fact, they have over 500,000 e-commerce stores running on their platform today. Shopify helps these companies by supporting them with website builder, payment processing technology, inventory management systems, analytics, hosting, you name it, they've got it if you need to run an e-commerce store. I've been a big fan of Shopify's engineering team for many years. Back when I was learning Ruby on Rails, they were an incredible resource thanks to all their open source contributions and their willingness to just share and teach others. It's always a pleasure to have their team come up and do talks at conferences because they're always continuously improving their tooling and culture, and there's lots of opportunities for everyone to learn from them. In today's session, we're going to be talking about how Shopify uses Slack as a shared interface to their production engineering tools. By building an internal integration that ties together multiple systems across their deployment and incident management tools, they're able to make the engineers' lives simpler, more pleasant, and more productive. Their internal integration, SPY, helps increase visibility and accountability across the engineering organization, which in turn helps with everything from training and onboarding to their ability to resolve incidents much faster. Regardless if you're a public company like Shopify or just working on a side project, I think we all have something that we can learn from today's session. So please please join me in welcoming John Arthorne to the stage.
Okay, welcome everyone. So just to warn you, I was dropped on a runway for 3 hours overnight last night, so I'm a little bit tired. So if I start to sleepwalk or wander around, please throw something at me or something like that. Keep me back on track. So like Sachin said, I'm going to talk about this internal integration we built at Shopify called SPY. But before I get into much detail, I want to just take a little step back and explain some of the context around why we built what we did. So going back about 4 years ago, Shopify was a fairly small, privately held startup, mostly located. We had about 250 employees, almost all located in a single office in Ottawa, Canada. And we're a small enough organization where if we had a new idea to get across, some new technology we wanted to introduce, or a decision we needed to be made, it was pretty easy to just get everyone together in one room and quickly share that context and work through an issue or explain something or make a decision. As we moved forward, we found we really liked this idea of having this shared operations room where we could do these things. So the next year we grew again we doubled in size and we opened a new headquarters in Ottawa, and we built this dedicated operations room that you see in this picture. And this, again, the idea here was let's have this one room where if there's something really important going on, some high stakes kind of situation, we can bring everyone together in one room So it's kind of had these tiered seating looking down on a huge monitor wall where you can see sort of monitoring from different tools and you can kind of see everything in one place. So this was great. We really liked it. It worked really well at a certain scale. But then as we move forward again, so going forward to this year, we're about 2,500 employees. We're across 6 offices. This idea of having everyone together in a single room, it seems kind of quaint now. Like we love the idea, but the actual technology of a physical space for doing it wasn't working for us. So what we did was we solved this through building an internal integration in Slack that brought together all this context and created a virtual operations room where we could have the same effect, but in a much more scalable way. So we built this integration called Spy. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the architecture. So Spy is a Ruby application written using the Lita bot framework. So it runs as an application in our data center. We actually have about 10 instances that run in parallel load balance so they can handle all the load. And then we have another data center where we have a backup instance where we can switch over to if we need to. So we have this application running at our data center. It connects into all sorts of other internal tools that we have in the company, and it also connects out to various third-party APIs. So there's about a dozen different third-party APIs that this tool reaches out to. So it's able to pull together information from all these different places. And then on the front end, we have a bot user in Slack that teams can interact with through commands, which go through to this backend. So that's just a quick overview of the architecture. And again, this is something we arrived at after a couple of years. So if you're starting out, this might seem a little bit complicated, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. So I want to walk through a few. I've got about 3.5 examples that I want to walk through just to give you a better idea of the kinds of workflows we use it for and where we find it really shines. So the first one I'm going to talk about is situational awareness for doing deployment. So Shopify, this core application, deploys on a continuous delivery cadence. So there's about 200 changes going into production a day, and we do about 50 releases per day to get those changes out. So it's a very fast-moving environment. There's lots of developers involved. And we find Spy helps us to coordinate that by giving everyone the right information they need at the right time. So if I'm a developer who has the change ready to release and I want it pushed to production, Spy will send me direct messages to let me know, hey, the automation is about to go deploy your change. Be ready. Here's a link to the logs. There's a link you can roll back or abort if you need to. So it just tells every developer who's participating in this deploy, be ready. Your change is about to go out. And then 5 minutes later or so, your change has been deployed into production. It sends you another message saying, hey, your change has been released. Now's a good time to validate it. If something's broken, here's what to do to get some help. So it just gives the developer the information they need when they need it. And then we go into our shared operations channel where we have all the developers are in this channel, and they can see a similar notification that goes out saying, here, our deployment to production is happening. Here's the set of commits that are contained in it, with links you can link straight to the diff in GitHub where you can see the change. You can see who's releasing it. And where this really comes in handy is if anything goes wrong or something, people have questions about what's going out, this shared operations channel becomes the natural place to jump into those conversations. So in this particular example, a test was failing and someone jumped in and said, hey, I'm looking into it, don't worry. And it means that any developer, if they see something is wrong or they're wondering about what's going on with production, they can jump into this channel and they can see the cadence of all the deploys going out. They can see all the conversations that might be happening about what's going on. And any developer can very quickly get up to speed and get the information that they need. So a couple of other commands that we added in Spy to help with deploys. As I said, deploys are typically fully automated. Like the deploys into production are done by a robot. But there are times when you might want to lock that and do a more controlled release. So we have a command, Spy ship it lock Shopify, that says, turn off the automatic deployment, and we want to be able to do manual deployments instead. So that's the first command that's used there. The second box you'll see there is we have this other tool which I won't explain why, but it's called Here Comes the Walrus. And its job is to figure out when is the right time to deploy into production. So this is used by our automation to make sure that deploys go out at the right time. If you try to force a deploy when you shouldn't, the Walrus sends you this message in the public channel and saying, hey, you shouldn't have done that, Shopify is locked. So we call this the Walrus shame. So we do it in the public channel so people know, like it's reinforced. You release something when you probably shouldn't have. Here's a tool that helps you avoid doing that again. In this particular case, it was intentional, but sometimes it's not. The third command that you see there is spy on call, IMOC. So that's calling out to PagerDuty to find out who is on call for what we call the incident response, incident commander role. And it just looks up who is on call for this right now and prints the result in the channel. And in this case, they're doing it just to make sure, we're making a change to our monitoring. We want to make sure that if you see something weird, you know what's going on. So it's just kind of an FYI situation, but the command helps us quickly do that without having to go out somewhere else. And everyone else knows the incident commander has been alerted. They don't need to go do that themselves. So let's say something does go wrong. So that leads us into our second scenario where the spy, like the Slack integration really works very well for us, is in incident response. So what we've built into Spy is there's a workflow for running through an incident. So you can say spy incident start. You say who the commander is, description of the problem, and this starts an incident. And what this does is a few different things. So it creates a dedicated public Slack channel for all incident communications. So everyone knows, you can end up, without this, you can end up with people talking in different places. They don't realize that someone else is also looking at it. By establishing, whenever there's an incident, there is a dedicated public channel. Anyone can go to it. Everyone knows what it is. And the spy command keeps track of that life cycle of the incident and lets people know. The other thing it will do is there's certain defined roles in incident response. Like I mentioned, the incident commander. There's a few others. And Spy will send them very discrete private messages with hints about things that you should be doing during an incident at certain times. So 5 minutes in, I might say, hey, is there something on the public status page to let customers know? After half an hour, it might say, whoa, this is going on a while. Do you need someone to spell you in? So it just sends reminders to people who are involved in an incident about things that they should be doing. Because in the heat of a moment, it can be really hard to remember these things. And also, if you have new people joining the team, it really helps them learn the role when they have this tool that's giving them the discrete reminders at the right moment to help guide them through the process if they haven't done it before. So a couple of the commands that we added for incident response. So, the Slack channel history during an incident can be very, very verbose, right? It can be lots of chatter going on, lots of sort of false positives and misinformation. And what you want after the fact for post-mortem analysis is you want to have a clear timeline of what were the key discoveries that were made, the key decisions, the key changes that we made. And so we added this really simple command, spy incident note, where you can say, here's this thing that we discovered, or a decision we made, or an action we took, and we record this note. And what Spy does with that is after the incident, it actually prints out a draft incident report with all the information you need, which includes these notes. So we found that really valuable for post-incident investigation, so you don't have to troll through pages and pages of chat transcripts, which are available, but it gives you the condensed summary of what happened. Another command we're using here is another PagerDuty integration where we're, in this case, the problem needed help from a front-end developer, so we say spy page fed front-end developer, and that looks up again who's on call. This one actually triggers a page event in PagerDuty and gets them in the picture. One final command that we use that we added more recently for incident response. So like I said, Spy has these notes of key events that have happened during the incident. And what happens is, a new person joins the incident response, and what often ends up happening is this person doesn't know what's going on. We need to get them up to speed. So often you end up having to rehash and repeat all this information. So we have another simple command, spy incident TLDR, and what that does, anyone can type this, and they can get this summary of all the key information about the incident. So they get the timeline, they get the summary, they know who all the key players are, the incident commander, they know when it started, they know what channel it's in. So it gives them that context so they can get up to speed very quickly with an incident. So we really found incident response be a situation where the SPY with the Slack-based tools were really valuable for us to just really up our game with how we respond to incidents in a more consistent way. So I'm going to go to one more major example, which is data center failover. So this is a little bit more complicated situation. I won't get into all the technical details, but so roughly speaking, Shopify, the application, runs in multiple data centers. And Shopify is broken into what we call pods or shards, which contain some fraction of customers. And if there's a problem in a data center, let's say there is a fire or a flood or a zombie attack or whatever, you might need to be able to fail over from one data center to another. This is a super complicated technical problem to solve. And the first few times we did this, it was, we had to have a room full of engineers. So this picture is one of our first failovers. We did it late at night at someone's house. And it's something that several hours of preparation, different people taking actions at different times. So it was something that was very painful, very obtrusive, which means that you don't really want to do this, right? It's kind of only in the case of dire emergency would we ever contemplate doing this. So we knew we needed to make this better, get it automated. So first step was we did this automation that, in theory, did the whole end-to-end flow of data center failover. But it was still something that, we did it once a month. And every time we did it, something had changed in our infrastructure which made the failover scripts not work as they should. So it was, we weren't doing it often enough to really grease the wheels and make this operation seamless, which meant if we really needed an emergency, it probably wouldn't work. So we knew we had to get better than that. So what we did was we set a goal at the beginning of this year to say we want to have a Slack command so that anyone in the company could do a data center failover from Slack. Actually, not anyone in the company, but like people who need to. So we actually just shipped this about a month ago. So in this example, someone is doing a failover of a portion of Shopify. I think it's between our Chicago and Ashburn data centers. And what you see, so there is actually an authorization step here where it makes sure that this is an infrastructure engineer who knows what they're doing. And it gives you a summary of what's happening, when it starts, when it ends. There's a lot more verbose output. So there's actually another Slack channel, a failovers channel, where you can see a much more detailed sort of transcript, play-by-play of what's going on. And then finally, there's another command that prints out the state of our infrastructure. So you say SPY pods, and it tells you, here's all our data centers, here's all the shards of Shopify and where they're running. So that gives you the confidence that, yeah, it did what we expect. So this example is a little bit different because there's nothing about the technology here that required using Slack to do it, right? But it was really about setting the cultural expectation that this is something that anyone should be able to do at any time. And actually, since we've released it about a month ago, we went from this operation that we did rarely and rarely worked to something that we now do almost daily. We've discovered new uses for using this now that we have a really solid way to do it. So one other super quick example, just a fun one. So there's a lot of developers have dorky sense of humor, and they make jokes in the channel. So we actually listen to reaction-added callbacks, and there's certain emoji reactions that denote jokes or puns were made. And SPY keeps track of all these jokes and gives a score to each channel. So you can say SPY puns, and it'll tell you what's the pun score in this channel. So just another fun example of the kind of things you can do. So just to sum up, we had this physical operations room that was really valuable at a certain scale, where we could make these quick decisions, share our context really quickly. But it was something that just would not scale as the company got bigger. And we found by building a virtual operations room in Slack, and you can see here, well, I don't know if you can see it, but there's about 600 people in this channel. They can all, it's like 600 people in a room. They've all got the shared, the virtual monitor wall that we had is now all these integrations that are putting information in. And you get this same effect of an operations room, but at a much higher scale. So this is something that I would highly recommend companies of any scale to play around with and explore, and it's something that we found really, really valuable. So I think I'm just going to end it there, and Sachin is going to come back up, and might be a little bit of time for Q&A.
Thank you so much, John. That was super helpful.
Oh, thanks.
Assuming you want that. Can I grab the clip?
Yep.
Cool. So we have about 10 minutes left for Q&A. I'm going to kick it off, and then I want to open up to the room. If you have something, just put up your hand, and we've got floating microphones. So my first question to you, John, is, this is a very open and collaborative way of working. How has that impacted your engineering culture?
So I would actually say it's kind of the opposite of that, when we were a small startup, this kind of very open, collaborative way of working is kind of a natural state in a small startup, and it's something that as a company gets bigger, tends to be lost over time. And we made this, this really conscious effort to, we really wanted to have this organization where everyone could see everything, everyone could access all the same tools, and we needed to scale that. So Slack is what enabled us to sort of retain and preserve that culture at the next level of scale.
Well, that makes sense. What advice would you have for companies that don't necessarily have that culture today, but are trying to move towards it and adopt chatops?
Right. So, you might be surprised what's happening down in the bowels of engineering organization. I've worked in big companies where, developers are on IRC or other channels. So, there often is, especially amongst developers, a very strong willingness to jump into these kind of collaborative workflows. There's certainly ways you can start with a lot of the sort of third-party integrations you can get. You can just sort of plug and play and drop them in. Gives you, a simple level of this kind of thing. So you can go from those third-party integrations as a starting point that's really easy to get started with. And then going into your own personal integrations, there's various frameworks out there that make it really easy. And you can start really small with simple commands and kind of build up from there, build your confidence in it.
Cool. Any questions in the room?
Hi. Have you open sourced any of the actual tooling that goes along with the bot?
So the framework that we're using is open source, so the Lita bot framework. The question is, have we open sourced any of the other integrations? And we haven't. And I'm not sure if we could, because for the most part, it's glue, right? That's tying together our internal systems and our third-party providers. And there isn't a ton of logic in SPY itself. It's mostly sort of pulling together bits from here and there and injecting them into Slack. So I don't think it's something that would have a lot of value in its current form if we open source, but it's something we're always considering. All these kind of tools are not business value for us. We're certainly, we do open source different parts of our tools and infrastructure when it makes sense to do so. So it could happen at some point.
Just one last thing.
Yep.
It seems like the bot knows about which user is deploying which thing. So where does that relationship get established? Is it just through their Slack profile, or?
Right. Well, that's a good question. So if anyone didn't hear it, the question was, where does the information, where is the sort of persistence of the knowledge of who's deploying what? Our general approach there is SPY is completely stateless. It has, a Redis store for very ephemeral, just the critical business information, like the pun scores and the current incident that's going on. But apart from that, it's stateless, and most of that state resides within different systems. So in the case of deployment automation, we have another tool, which is actually, we did open source, called ShipIt, which is our deployment orchestrator, and that has a database, and it connects, couples pretty tightly to get information about deploying, sort of commits, and it has a model of what deploys and when they're happening and who did them and what was involved. So yeah, it mostly lives outside. There's some other questions further back. Yep.
I appreciated you talking about, you have an incident and you're in that hysteria phase of how many users are impacted and trying to figure all that out. And you get everybody in the same channel and you can see it taking traction. So is yours always called #WarRoom?
Yes. Yeah, and actually I've had that debate with people in other companies, because some companies don't really like to keep it quiet. What we do for production instance, we do use the dedicated channel name WarRoom, and the SPY incident command will, in the very rare case where we had multiple, it would automatically create a WarRoom 2, WarRoom 3. So they're well-known channel names, and actually a surprising number of people just hang out of that channel all day, and we don't have incidents every day, but when they do, they can follow along. So I think for discoverability, having consistent name is really valuable.
Cool, thank you.
There's someone with a mic, so go ahead.
I have a mic, so I'll ask a question. So I was getting a lot of like Unix overtones with the command structure, and I got the sense that you're either thinking about or you actually have like a man page for your spy command. But I guess how do you solve the problem of just general usability of like new users coming into your system, learning all the different commands that are available as well as the options that they take and that sort of thing?
I see. So usability, I wouldn't say, like, the way we have this set up within the company is the code base is available to any developer in the company who wants to add commands. So it's a very wide group of developers who are contributing to it. There's a couple of hundred different developers that have made commits in there. So that does lead to slight inconsistencies, I guess, in things like syntactic structure. I would say the big thing around usability is we focus on the decision of like what kind of commands make sense here. So there's certain kinds of tools that are, for example, where there's like very high data density or very dynamic data, where having that appearing in a spy output would be too verbose, and it's better to sort of link you out to an external tool and maybe just summarize and give notifications in Slack. So I think the UX decisions are around what's the information that we pull into Slack, what goes in the public channel, what goes in the DM, and then what kinds of information is it better to just give them a link out and they can go to another interface to see that. So those kind of questions I think are a lot more interesting in building a workflow that's really successful. I mean, certainly, having a consistent syntax is good, but I mean, those other concerns are really important too. Yep.
So it looks like you're monitoring for the keyword spy. I get this question from our internal developers a lot. Is it better to use an @mention of the bot name to monitor for a keyword, to use the / command? So I'm curious how you decided what the trigger was going to be for your activities.
I see. So I'm actually not 100% sure if that's not something we got from the Lita bot framework that we were using. But I would say like that syntax was just very natural for us. Like having to say @spy, and have a direct message to them. It's just one extra character to type, right? The most important thing, like why we picked the name spy, was it has to be something really easy to type and really simple interface, very short command names. So I think that felt the most natural to us. I don't know if I have really a better answer than that, but if you can't decide, I would recommend doing it that way. It worked pretty well for us.
Cool. So we're just about on time. The keynote is next door, so we're going to have to finish with a hard stop. Thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate taking the time. John, thank you so much for coming out. It was awesome hearing about Spy. Thank you.
Thanks.